Good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you all for joining. You're all welcome to the 8th edition of the City's Lunchtime Chats. And this edition will be talking on building cities for climate and disaster resilience. We have two speakers, Mandy from Sanbi. She'll be talking, on climate resilience and disaster resilience, and so will Dr. Zachariah from the University of the Free State. And we trust that you will engage and you will also learn from um, the discussions that we'll be having this afternoon. So I'm going to hand over to Mandy. So Mandy can start with her presentation. And if you have any questions along the way, you could either type it out or once Mandy's done with her presentation, then you could you know, raise your hand and ask it if you'd like to engage further. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks very much, Dora, and good afternoon, colleagues. Can I just check, do you see it in slideshow mode?
We do, yes.
Wonderful. Okay, I think that tech might be cooperating today. So good afternoon, everybody, on this nearly end of year seminar. Thank you all for joining. I'm sure it's the last week for many of you. As Dora said, my name's Mandy. I'm Mandy Barnett. I'm a Chief Director in SANBI in our Adaptation Policy and Resourcing Division. And we are the part of SANBI that works with the Green Climate Fund and the Adaptation Fund to try and secure resources for South Africa and South Africans to adapt to climate change. So today I'll be talking about what this means in the context of South Africa and what we've been doing to mobilize resources. We have a pipeline of proposals in development, and in particular one that is hopefully going to the Green Climate Fund Board for approval in June next year. It's a project called Scaling Up Ecosystem-Based Approaches to Managing Climate-Intensified Disaster Risks in Vulnerable Regions of South Africa. It's a long name. We call it our EcoDRR project proposal. And I'm very excited to share this with you today. It's a bit of a pathfinder for how we work with district municipalities and others in South Africa to secure climate fund money to help our especially vulnerable communities adapt to climate change. So the context that we are working in is this one. SANBI is an accredited entity who's able to work with the Green Climate Fund and the Adaptation Fund. And what that means, colleagues, is that we can work directly with the funds on behalf of South African projects to secure resources. It's a little different to how these big multilateral funds normally operate, whereby they are accessed by multilateral implementing entities like the UN agencies or the World Bank, etc. So this is called direct access when a national entity or subnational entity gets accredited. It's quite a mission, put it that way, to get accredited and stay accredited. But what it gives us is much better control as a national entity to be able to respond to the policy environment of the country and to be responsive to the subnational and national entities that we are serving. For those of you that don't know, SANBI, the South African National Biodiversity Institute, is an entity under the DFFE, the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment. So we take our mandate from the DFFE and we are responsive to DFFE and the other national and subnational entities in the country for our work. So since we've been accredited, which is quite a long time now, we have been working on implementing 2 adaptation fund projects, which are now complete, but are also on the development of a proposal pipeline, which is currently has a value of $85 million US. And I'll be talking about that proposal pipeline today. All of the proposals will directly benefit local communities. That's how the Green Climate Fund and the Adaptation Fund measure their impact. So all of our projects at the end of the day result in human beings who are currently vulnerable to climate change being less vulnerable based on the interventions that are supported. So as a biodiversity institute, SANBI's niche in the space is the biodiversity climate change nexus. So you'll see that a theme through all of our projects is a natural resource theme or an ecological infrastructure theme, although our projects don't focus solely on natural resource management, because what we advocate for quite strongly is that climate change is a multidimensional thing, and we need to be able to respond to it in multidimensional ways. And I'm sure that those of you that are working at the coalface in your district municipalities, which is where I'm thinking that many of you come from, you'll know that climate change affects all parts of our economic and social systems simultaneously. And we need to be able to respond in a sophisticated systems-wide kind of way. So this is our portfolio in SANBI. It's a very busy slide because it's a very busy program of work. We have 8 Green Climate Fund and Adaptation Fund proposals in development. 3 of these have got what's called project preparation funding from the Green Climate Fund and are fairly well advanced. And then there's another 5 that are in earlier stages of development. So the 3 that are most advanced, you can see them on the screen. There's EcoDRR, that's project 1, and that's the one I'll speak to about today. But to just whet your appetites a little bit, project number 2, it's the one on the bottom left, is a project that is focusing on smallholder farmers in several district municipalities. You can see them in brown on the little map. And it's focusing on a combination of supporting the smallholder farmers at the farm level, and also early warning systems for the farmers or smallholder producers, as we are advised by the National Agriculture Department how to frame the people that we're working with. Then our 3rd project is called EBA Water. It's a water security project that is focusing on our strategic water source areas in South Africa. You can see the map of where they are. They're the areas high up in our mountain catchments, where most of our water comes from, 50% of South Africa's water from 10% of the land. And project number 3 will focus on that. And then project number 4 is quite an exciting one, where we are wanting to bring adaptation finance to the local level in the district municipalities that you can see on the map there. And this is about activating a small grant mechanism where local communities and local people can determine what kind of adaptation responses they want to have supported, and then be able to access resourcing for those. And then we've got another 3 proposals in development on coastal ecological infrastructure, groundwater recharge, and the just transition. So it's a lot of work that's underway, colleagues. And maybe I don't want to spend too much time on this slide, but just to say, if you do want more information on any of this, please reach out to SANBI. We would love to work with you. We'd love to, show you in more detail what we're doing. And certainly, if the areas where you work coincide with the areas that are coming up on these maps, you should already have been engaged. So if that's not the case, please do reach out to us. Okay, so before I move to my next slide, I do want to take one step back and just go, I'm assuming that everybody knows what climate change adaptation is, but in case not, climate change adaptation is the work that we put in place to respond to the impacts of climate change. So when we speak about climate change mitigation, we're speaking about the work to slow climate change down. With adaptation, we are accepting that a certain amount of climate change is already happening and is projected to get worse, and we need to adapt to these climate futures. So when I speak about adaptation, that's what I'm talking about. Not so much the work that's about stopping emissions or using energy in a different way, but much more about how do we respond to the climate impacts that are already happening. And to give you a flavor of what I'm talking about, especially for the EcoDRR project, here is some of what you've seen in the news. And this is the last more or less 3 months. Some little snapshots from the online news just about extreme weather and floods, storms and floods, disruptive snow, rain, thunderstorms. You know, we've seen this flash across our news screens a lot. This is taking us into the drought news. Again, Water Department telling us that they're going to make a new climate change response strategy for dealing with scarce water conditions, water rationing for drought-stricken towns, Eastern Cape farmers dealing with devastating droughts. Again, a picture that is all too familiar to us. I'm based in Cape Town. Not so long ago, we were talking about day zero. Gauteng is facing some of that as we speak. And then, of course, fire. Lots of news articles about increased wildfire incidents, extreme fire events, fire warnings. And again, you know, these are increasingly in the media. And there's a substantial body of work that attributes the frequency and severity of these extreme events to climate change. So flood, fire, drought, it's not news to us. We've had them forever in South Africa, but the climate science is telling us that the frequency and the severity of these events can be attributed to climate change. In other words, climate change is making the likelihood of flood, fire, drought and the severity of flood, fire, drought worse. And I've put on here, you know, just some of the reports that are available for those of you that want more information about the science. So our first project proposal as SANBI is about responding to this. And as I said, it's our Eco-DRR project. It's about responding to flood, fire, and drought in 4 district municipalities across the country. It's a project that we have been developing with the DFFE and with the NDMC, the National Disaster Management Center, and SELGA. We're asking for $40 million in grant finance. That's about 800 million rand, more or less, over an 8-year implementation period. And the aim of the project is the large-scale implementation of ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction in response to floods, wildfires, and droughts that are made worse by climate change. At the end of the project, if we are successful in securing the resources, we will benefit almost 5 million people, mostly in peri-urban and rural communities. And here, colleagues, is a snapshot of the front page of the funding proposal and a project summary that we have. And Dora, I should have actually given you the project summary to circulate to the colleagues. I'll do that after the meeting. It's not very many pages, and it will just give you what I'm saying now in a little bit more detail in case you want to refer back to it. So the first full draft of the project proposal is complete. We're aiming to submit it to the Green Climate Fund formally in January 2024. And as I've said, we're hoping that this will result in substantial funding flows coming into the district municipalities that I've shown you in or from the middle of next year. Okay, so this is a picture just to show you how climate change impacts the natural environment and the human environment and why we are proposing to do the work that we're doing. So I won't spend too much time on this project, on this slide, colleagues, but it's a little bit of a lights on moment for how does climate change affect us. So if you look at the very bottom square that is circled in brown, you can see it says projected temperature increase. And we know that across the board, that's what climate change will do, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. We've got very clear signals of temperature increasing already and certainly into the near future. That, the bottom one is projected carbon dioxide, okay? And we know that we've got atmospheric carbon dioxide that's higher than ever before, and that brings us to the red boxes, which is the projected increase in temperature, and I've explained what that is. And that projected increase in temperature is causing an increase in the frequency and severity of extreme weather events, as well as changes in rainfall pattern. And you can see there's also a straight line from the increase in carbon dioxide to increased biomass. Can you see my mouse, Dora, or not? You can just see the slide, right?
Yeah. I can see the mouse moving.
Oh, you can see the mouse.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So
Thanks.
I'm struggling to read what's on the slide because it's quite tiny for me, but I'm assuming you can all read it. And you can see, colleagues, these are the climate hazards: carbon dioxide, temperature, causing changes in extreme weather events and changes in rainfall. And then this results in a whole lot of weather impacts that we're familiar with, right? We've got high winds, we've got lightning, things like that. And then that impacts on the biophysical environment, where we've got, I really need to see if I can make this bigger for myself. Sorry, colleagues, just give me a moment. That's not doing it. Okay, I don't want to mess around too much. I'm not going to try and read what's in the little boxes because I can't actually see it, but you can read it and you can get a sense of how the carbon dioxide and the temperature are causing changes in weather. And then that changes in weather is causing impacts on the biophysical environment. And that impacts on the biophysical environment, the green and the yellow boxes, are causing impacts on our human systems, where we have got food insecurity, water insecurity, damage to infrastructure, those things that we know that climate change is causing. And those of you that are working in municipalities will be very concerned about the gray boxes, because that's where your service delivery is impacted. Those of us that are working in the natural environment are very concerned about the green boxes, because we know that the condition of the natural environment and of ecological infrastructure has an impact on the way that humans and the societies in which humans live interface with that biodiversity, and the extent to which that biodiversity can be a buffer from the extreme weather events that are coming from climate change. So we've designed a project together with the district municipalities and SELGA and the DFFE and the NDMC, which proposes to bring eco-DRR responses into 4 district municipalities that are on the map in front of you. So we're working in Alfred Nzo, in Ekhlanzeni, in Sekhukhune, and in Ngaka-Modiri-Molewa. And you can see the provinces that these districts fall into, and you can see the local municipalities. And most of the interventions will be at local municipal level, but very much about scaling that into the districts and into the rest of the country as we interface with DRR policies and enabling frameworks. So the project is structured according to 3 outcomes and 6 outputs. So I'll take you through the overall structure of the project. Outcome 1 is where we are doing interventions on the ground, especially in the Alfred Nzo and Ekhlanzeni district municipality. It's about the incorporation of eco-DRR strategies into integrated landscape management, which will enhance the resilience of ecological infrastructure, built infrastructure, and climate vulnerable communities. And we'll do that in 2 ways: by investing in ecosystem rehabilitation and management, and also by investing in locally led adaptation and sustainable ecosystem-based livelihoods. So that program of work, colleagues, as I said, will play out mainly in Alfred Nzo and Ekhlanzeni, and then with smaller footprints in Sekhukhune and Ngaka-Modiri-Molewa district municipality. The second, and this is, colleagues, to give you, I'm glad the slide is here, I wasn't sure if it was, to give you a sense of what this will look like. So this is a district municipality in KZN. It's the Nklazuka district municipality on the outskirts of local municipality in Umgungundlovu district municipality, which, as you know, is round about the Pietermaritzburg area. And you can see what we're talking about when we talk about ecological infrastructure and investing in landscape management to protect communities. So you can see in the foreground, there's a river and there's weirs that have been put in place. You can see those, you can't see them in detail, but those lines that are put at the beginning of where the erosion is starting. And what those weirs do is they improve the functionality of those river systems upstream, which means that when the extreme rainfall events happen and water comes flooding downstream, it's buffered by the natural environment and doesn't slam into the downstream communities, causing damage to infrastructure. So that's the kind of thing we're thinking about in the blue outcome of the eco-DRR project, investing in landscape management so that we've got catchments that are healthy and that when storms and fires come, they are less impactful on the communities that live in or around those natural areas. So I'm sorry, colleagues, this is Willendlela, not in Klazuka, on the outskirts of Pietermaritzburg. The second outcome that we're working with is one that will be of particular interest, I think, to the municipalities, because it's where we're working with disaster risk reduction. And this program of work will be incorporating ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction into transformative disaster preparedness and response to reduce the adverse impact of climate-induced hazards on built infrastructure and climate-vulnerable communities. In the first outcomes, we'll be working with local governments and communities to implement eco-DRR preparedness and response measures. And what this means is about preparing communities for floods, fires, and droughts by bringing early warning messages in the right language and the right time into communities so that they can respond. So if it's a flood or a fire, we need to get out of the way really quickly. So those early warning messages need to be effective and efficient in the way that they get into communities. And if it's something like a drought, it's a slow onset event, and communities need to be supported to respond in time. So, perhaps there are water storage measures coming in, or reduction of water consumption, those sorts of things. So this component of work will work in all of the districts, municipalities, to look at disaster response, working with SAWS to make sure that the information that SAWS provides comes into the disaster management functions of the municipalities and then gets to the communities in an appropriate way. And we're hoping to innovate in this part of the project and come up with mechanisms that can be scaled elsewhere across the country. This work is, as I said, it's being led by SALGA with the district municipalities and in partnership with the NDMC. And in 2.2, we're mainstreaming eco-DRR into planning and policy environments. And here we are working with assets to look at which assets are vulnerable to climate change in municipalities, to look at how those need to be invested in. You'll know that certain assets like bridges and roads are really critical to communities being able to function. And if you know which ones are likely to be most at risk, you're able to develop investment plans that can support them. And then also looking at things like your integrated development plans, your spatial development frameworks, and how do we make sure that those are aligned with flood, fire, drought, future impacts, and that better planning is supported for these disaster events. And then finally, colleagues, in the third outcome, we're investing in financial mechanisms to enhance this program of work, both in the public and the private sector. And we're looking at enhancing decision-making for eco-DRR with better portals for information and communities of practice that make sure that we're capturing the lessons and sharing them. And I think you can see across this program of work, quite a rich set of lessons is going to emerge and hopefully be instructive and informative for how we move forward with this kind of work across the country. So the project budgets, colleagues, as I said, it's a $40 million grant request. We are implementing over 8 years, and you can see across the bottom how the budgets are spread across the different categories. It's times 20 approximately to give you an idea of the US dollar rand exchange rate. So, for our dwindling government budgets, it's quite a nice cash injection into our human resource capacity and our systems to do the work. In outcome one, there's quite a lot of on-the-ground implementation work. That's why that budget is so high, and lots of jobs being created for mainly the unemployed youth in these districts, so that we give a real boost to those local economies as we are doing this work. And then finally, colleagues, just to give you a sense of the implementation arrangements, the funding, if you look at the column around the funding, the middle one, will flow from the funder through SANBI and onto our sub-executing entities, who in this case will be SALGA and a number of other entities that are identified in the district municipalities to help deliver the work. And the work will be coordinated and governed by a range of mechanisms. The top one, the National Adaptation Fund's advisory body, is already in place. We'll be setting up steering committees and project management committees, and then a range of task teams that will make sure that the program of work is coordinated. Okay, so colleagues, it's a lot for you to take in on a what is today, even Tuesday, in the middle of, of December, when our brains are all shutting down. But I hope I've made you at least feel a little bit excited about this project that hopefully is coming into South Africa. It's got a really exciting footprint in the district municipalities. SANBI, as a direct access entity, is fixated on building a capable state. We know that there are shortcomings in terms of mandates, in terms of capacity, in terms of resourcing. And with the colleagues in the district municipalities and SELGA, we want to lean into those challenges and see how we can come up with systems that start to solve them and that are instructive for how we do this across the rest of the country. So, Dora, that's the final slide, just to say that our next steps are moving towards finalization and submission. We'll then have a backwards forwards with the Green Climate Fund over about 6 months as we get the project ready for the Green Climate Fund board. And we'll, of course, hope to be excitedly announcing that the project is taking place. So, colleagues, thank you very much. As I've said, there's a bunch of other projects that SANBI is working with. We'd love to have you play along with us if you're interested in this program of work. So please do reach out for us if that is the case. And now I remember I forgot to put my camera on, so that is what I look like, Dora. It's a bit late, but better late than never.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mandy, and thank you for your presentation. There you go, colleagues. You've heard what the Eco DRR is all about, and what the objectives of the project is about. If there are any questions, you are welcome to ask. I haven't seen any in the chat box. Perhaps from my side, while people are still trying to, come up with their questions. From my side, I just want to know, and I'm sure it will help other municipalities, how did you identify the local communities? Okay, I know you said you're identifying vulnerable ones, but how do those communities make the cut? So for a municipality that's, got a lot of vulnerable communities in their jurisdiction, how would they be part of, any future project?
Well, thanks for the question. So SANBI has been identifying the projects and the communities for a long time now. SANBI was first accredited with the Green Climate Fund in 2016. So it's been almost 7 years of working with this. And what we did, and some of you might remember, all the way back in 2017-18, we issued a call for expression of interest, where we asked those who were interested in working with SANBI on projects to put forward proposals. And the 8 projects that we're working on currently that I shared on my first slide, I can actually go back to it, came from that process. So it's been a very long time of us working with these. At the time, we didn't know which would be the sites. So we were working more, I've gone past it, sorry. We were working more with ideas. And then we moved forward to identifying the districts. And the way that we did that is we conducted what are called vulnerability assessments, where we take the climate projections of the country and we downscale them to our various parts of the country to ask where will we find communities that are hardest hit by the hazards we are working with. So in this one, we were looking at flood, fire, drought. In the farming project, EBA Farm, we were looking at smallholder farmers. In the water security project, we were looking at where are the water stressed areas of the country. And that's how we found the districts. So there was never a time where we said to the districts, put yourselves forward, because we have to follow a scientific process. And then once we have a bit of a short list, we start to engage with the districts through the municipal managers and also on the ground. So that's how we have been working. I am very excited to tell you all that we have been embarking on a project with Wits University to develop climate change fact sheets for each of the district municipalities. And that will help the districts see how, using the most current climate models, almost taking the Green Book to its next iteration, that will help the districts see where you have the most vulnerability in which areas. And Dora, maybe next year we can do a lunchtime talk with Wits University, with Francois Engelbrecht, around those climate fact sheets to be able to show the districts what is the new science we have available that they can use to inform their climate change responses. So that's an aside. The SANBI pipeline is currently quite full. As you can see, we're working on 8 project proposals. However, we do have a process that if a district municipality or a collection of district municipalities wants to put forward an idea that they would want SANBI to support, there's a process that can be followed, and I can share that also with you. Dora, I can share that with you. You can share it with the districts. I do want to manage expectations here, which is to say we are currently on the floor in terms of how little capacity we have to move this work forward. But of course, we're thinking into the future, especially with climate change. So if working with SANBI is something you would like to do, then for sure, let's start the conversation. And, we're laying the ground slowly for being able to partner with additional districts in the future.
Thank you, Mandy. I see there are no questions. There's a colleague from Alfred Nzo District Municipality that's saying in the chat box that they're really excited about the project. They're looking forward to it. There's another colleague asking for the presentations, so we will share the presentations, and Mandy promised to share some other documents. I know the funding proposal, and we'll share with everyone in attendance. I see there's a comment from Mark. Okay, Mark is just saying he's going to engage further as they're busy with a number of projects. I see Sean's hand. Sean?
Sorry, Dora, I was just letting you know that there's a hand by D-Bess.
Okay, please go ahead. D-Bess.
Thank you so much. I'm Councillor Bessie from Swartland Municipality. Can I go?
Yes, please.
Okay. I just want to ask, SANBI is working on this water in everything, climate change. Seeing that in, say, 10, 20 years from now, we're going to have a water scarcity. Is there any study that was conducted about underground reservoirs? Is there anything you can tell us about that? Please, man. I'm very worried. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Mandy, I'm not sure if you want to respond.
Sure, I can respond. Councillor, there has been some work done on groundwater water, and actually, if you look if you can read it, there's a groundwater recharge project in the tiny script at the bottom of the slide that is on the board, where SANBI will be working with Western Cape, Northwest, and Limpopo provinces around a project that looks at that specifically. I know that SANBI has done some work on underground water resources. I don't have it at my fingertips now, but if you contact me via email, I can put you in contact with the colleagues that are doing that. And certainly there is worry about it. And, in particular, every time we drop a borehole and think that there's an unlimited water supply underneath, we know that that's not actually the case. So, it is worrying about how sustainable are our groundwater resources. And one of the things that SANBI is keen to support is improved infiltration. So again, it brings us back to our biodiversity mandate, where we know that if we manage our cities in a way that we have got permeable surfaces, we don't put concrete on everything. We've got, sustainable urban drainage. We've got natural areas where we haven't compacted the soil so much that when it rains, the soil can't seep in. Those are the kinds of things in a natural resource space that we can do to make sure that we're protecting, as you correctly point out, our very precious underground resources.
Thank you. Thank you, Mandy.
Sorry, Chair. I'm actually worried about underground reservoirs. Is there anything done like that yet? That's actually what I want to know, because we need to start thinking about underground reservoirs as well.
So sorry, Councillor, I was understanding underground reservoirs and groundwater to mean the same thing. But perhaps I'm not sure if it's a terminology thing or if we're missing each other. But what I'm talking about are the big areas under the ground where naturally water collects. So our underground, rivers and lakes and reservoirs. And so when we talk about our groundwater resources, that's what I'm meaning by that, the underground resources that I think you're talking about, and you know, share your concern that we are utilizing them and often in an unsustainable way because we don't have enough information. Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you
Thanks.
so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mandy. I also know the Water Research Commission also does, you know, they've got some studies on you know, underground reservoirs and so on. I don't see any other hands nor any other questions. So we'll move on to our next presentation. Thank you, Mandy. We'll move on to our next presentation. Well, Dr. Zachariah from the University of Free State. He will be talking to us also on, you know, climate and disaster risk resilience and how can we adapt. Over to you, Doctor.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Bennett, and thank you for those are here. I want to say you, Dr. Bennett, has already actually captured a lot of things I really wanted to talk about. As we have said, that it's going to be launch time to discuss about building cities for resilience against disaster reduction. As you know, we are coming from the teaching environment, which is the university, where most of the things we do is research and also the teaching. And what we do mostly is to also build capacity. You know, as we have just heard a lot of projects about. But quickly, what I want to do, you know, I will just share briefly. Sorry, Dora, I just want to share something that maybe we can just talk about it, but I will just come back to looking at how we can really integrate these things and also see how we can be able to build capacity. Because recently I just discovered that there are a lot of projects that are on ground, or sometimes we go take some assessment, but there is no capacity to be able to follow through these things. And it's not the lack of capacity is not because we don't have the number of people on ground, but we lack the expertise, you know, that we're able to follow up all those stuff that we're talking about in order to build resilience in terms of when it comes to our cities. So, but I would also share is a work that we are working on recently, working on in, let me see if you can be able to see my slide. Please, can you see my slide?
Yes, Doctor, we can. Thank you.
Yes.
All right, so I will just run through this, then I'll come back to what we need to talk about. So because as I say, we do more for research. We know that recently there has been an incident of flood, you know, in KZN, and we know that at the moment the greatest challenge is we're trying to look at how we can be able to mitigate and build resilience against flooding and the likes. But one of our sources in order for that is reconnected to building city resilience. Is to us, building resilience is coming to that understanding of what is really the challenge on ground. You know, until you know the challenge on ground, that's when you can be able to talk about how you want to build the resilience against the challenge you are confronting. So, and one of the things that sometimes we neglect is that we don't take into cognizance understanding the environmental challenges or the environmental system, which is why sometimes building resilience becomes a real problem, because there is not lack of connectivity to how the systems in the environment works. So in these studies, we try just look at briefly. So I won't try to go through the academics of the work, but I just want to look at shows the result. We're trying to look at the dynamics, the shoreline dynamics, as we are looking at challenges with respect to flooding in the interland of KZN, which is basically around the Durban coastline. We also want Durban itself. So we also want to look at how do we understand these dynamics and how these dynamics can affect us in the future. So we also did the work to look at the shoreline dynamics. And in this work, as you see, we're trying to concentrate around Durban, because we know Durban is one of the biggest cities in South Africa, and the population there is massive. And so, and the coastline is one of the areas that, you know, we have a lot of our businesses, we have a lot of our recreational activities take place in that place. So, but we also want to understand what are the changes, because so that we won't just be caught unaware, like when the flooding came, it seems like we are caught unaware. So we were trying to run a study so that we can be able to inform decision makers and policy makers on what to do and how to get prepared in case of also some challenges that might come around. So, and we know there is indeed climate change challenge, but one of the impacts of climate change is one of the major impacts is the sea level rise, and the sea level rise, you know, can come into many dimensions. But one of the first receivers of the impact of the sea level rise are the people at the coast, and most of our major cities in Africa and in the world, where you have over 1 million people, are by the coast. And that's where you see a lot of also business activities, you know, tourism and the likes. So understanding the dynamics around the coastline is very, very important in order for us to be able to know what to do, to be able to build a resilience against the challenges that we are looking at ahead of us. And one of the things we run through this, we use satellite images, and that's one thing we also have to employ, the use of technology, because the use of technology will help us so much in understanding the challenges that we have at hand. Because if you employ technology like the remote sensing and GIS, and now we can also talk about the AIO. If you come into the environmental space, or you can look at maybe the Joe AI, where you do some analysis, a quick analysis, a rapid analysis that can help you understand the challenges. And so that's the kind of methodology we use for this analysis. We use the satellite image, and that's the remote sensing and GIS to arrive at this. And looking at this methodology, we look at the images from 1990 down to 2023. And after that, we process the image, define our shoreline, we define our baseline, we calculate the changes. That's the changes which are we're going to have something like the net shoreline movement, the linear rates, regression rates, and the endpoint rates, and also project, because now we don't just look at what is happening. You also have to make a projection, be able to know what is going to come ahead. And making that projection is so important to be able to define and tell us what we are to prepare for. And so the result we have is this. This is a coastline of Durban. We divided it into north and southern part of Durban, and north and southern part of Durban. We use the harbor to define what is the north and what is the south. And from this, what you are looking at here, you can see that, our major towns are around this coastline, and a lot of activity takes place around here. And we can see that, if you see the places with the yellow colors, shows that there are some stability. It shows that indeed the coastline around those areas are a bit stable, and stability can only be achieved maybe when we actually maintain the ecology, the ecological setting in that area. That's what we're talking about. The forests are intact, or in this case, our mangrove are in good place. So there is going to be stability, because when it comes to coastline, whether it is accretion, which is deposition, or erosion, which is the removal or retreat of the coastline, has an impact on biodiversity, have impact on the environment in one way or the other. So, but we are trying to see how we can do to maintain stability. To maintain stability means ensuring that our forests or our mangroves around the coastline are in good shape. It means that there is proper conservation around those areas. But you can see areas with red, the orange color towards the orange to red colors. Those are the areas of erosion. And you see areas of high erosion along these areas, which is the major part of central Durban. But towards this side, you can see the green color shows accretion or deposition. Yeah, you can see some level of accretion or deposition. This is as a result of building things like the seawall, the hard structure, to be able to ensure that there is some level of resilience. But those resilience sometimes are not very sustainable, because they also increase erosion downstream, or say downside of the coast, which we also look at things like what we call the longshore drift that has impact on high rate of erosion or high rate of deposition downstream. So you see, in 1990, this is the same, from 1990 to 2023, these are the changes that we also notice using the net shoreline movement, which is showing as a result in meter, how much meters of land has been affected, whether by deposition or by erosion. And, the same thing, we look at it in the endpoint rate, which shows us the yearly, a removal or deposition of sediments along the coastline of Durban. So we also we look at the southern part of Durban, which seems to be more affected by erosion, and this is also talks about the level of how vulnerable that side of Durban is. And and one thing we know is that area is more natural down south, looking like good at Esipingo and Salof and the likes. You see some level of vegetation around those areas. Those vegetation need to be really conserved, and I know some of them are already under the conservation of the South African Arctic Forest Conservation Unit. So, but there is more to be done. If not, the erosion continues, and we know, if you look at around that site, around the Isipingo side, Mlazi, there is a big human settlement around that area. You understand? Informal settlement, and if current rate of change continues, we're talking about in the near future that large number of people, that big town around that area will disappear. Yeah, we know that it indeed is not a formal settlement, but that was a settlement. The people are there at the moment, and so there's something need to be done in order to be able to build resilience against whatsoever that is coming, or there is a need to, in fact, relocate that particular population if there is any if there is a need to do that, or if there is means to do that. So this is what we can see towards the southern part of that of Durban. Then we can move down. This is just a statistic to show what are the changes that occur around those areas. Then we move down to, let me just, because for the sake of this discourse, let me just move to look at the projection. So by the projection, it shows us that these areas that were experiencing stability in the northern part of Durban, they are already now experiencing erosion, which tells us that something is being, the rate of change is affecting, the vegetation, which is supposed to be a natural buffer from any from the waves and the tides around those areas of and the storm surges around those areas of the coastline. Although the central Durban still maintains some level of accretion, which also shows us that, okay, fine, the hard structures are working, but there is need for us to be able to do both the hard and the soft structure, adopt using the nature-based solution to be able to ensure that at least if you are protecting somewhere, the other side of if you are protecting the upper part, the lower part is not being affected. So also we saw that in the site of Southern Durban, yes, the rate of erosion is also increasing around that areas. Yes, and if you can see, since the erosion is happening here, definitely is going to be deposition along this site. You understand? So that's why the erosion, as we are looking at the erosion increasing here, the deposition is taking place towards this side, even though we can talk about the hard structures along these areas. So if you look at the southern part, it seems like, oh, there is some level of accretion, but the level of accretion we are seeing here, or the level of deposition, is as a result of the erosion that has taken place. And those deposition, even if they are increasing, it means they are tampering with things like biodiversity in terms of maybe habitat, because when you destroy, the greatest destruction that you can do to biodiversity is destruction of their habitat, and which we can see even when there is a position, such habitats are going to be destroyed, not just erosion that destroy the habitat, and so it's going to be lost in their biodiversity. So we're looking at this. These are also the statistics along those areas. So let me just stop sharing this, but this is just one of the things we are looking at, because we are trying to see, like, for example, specifically we have a lab, we're trying to see how we can do risk assessment across the board, as we looking at SAMBI as one of the organization that is in trying to ensure that projects happen. But sometimes when projects are happening, there is need for you to have what we call the background or the baseline information that can be able to inform appropriate things that need to be done along those axes. So I just want to just stop sharing this, then just add something that has to do with the general things that actually prepare for in terms of looking at, so how do you now then build resilience, in South Africa with respect to things we have already identified in our cities at the moment. So like this, what I just shared now, this same incident, the same challenges, the same changes is also happening in Cape Town. And these are also cities that have over a population of about 3 million or so. And so we saw it, okay, there is need for us to do these things across all the coastal city that we are within South Africa. So let's look at climate responsive urban planning. So how do we go about this? Yes, use of technology, as I say, use of GIS and remote sensing will help us in vulnerability assessment, risk assessment, of all these hazards that we can identify in our various cities. Then we'll talk about avoiding, building in risk-prone areas such as floodplains and the likes. Yes, recently I was in Alfred Nzo for a risk assessment. I realized that indeed there are a lot of buildings that are in flood-prone areas, and thank God, because the rainfall is not that much along that area. If not, those also buildings are buildings that we can say they are susceptible to things like landslide and the like. So as much as we look at projects, there is need for us to have a community-based project that will really inform the people, because there's lack of awareness down when we go to the communities on how things should be done, especially when it comes to buildings on places where they are very dangerous in this, which is there's need for a proper land use planning to avoid those issues. Then we look at compact urban growth. Ensure, like, for example, especially in our cities where land can be scarce, or sometimes we can say, oh, the land is there. People just go there and start building. But the thing is that I think we should think about vertical buildings, building, when we say compact, compact building that will enable us to have space that can be able to accommodate the changes that happens in our environment. When you have, for example, 10 hectares of land, if you can be able to 10 hectares of land and you want 100 people want to settle in there, you can use just a hectare to be able to build whatever thing they can build, and leave the remaining 9 hectares, to accommodate other things. And unfortunately, sometimes we get to build on wetlands, which are supposed to be our natural buffers for flooding and the likes. So also look at sustainable infrastructure, like also I heard from Dr. Bonnet when she was talking about building, resilience buildings, buildings that allow, water to percolate. Everybody want to pave his or her compound because paving is cheaper than maybe trying to keep the garden or other things. But if we really want to pave, then we should pave in a way that will allow infiltration to take place. We're asking questions about how studies on aquifer, that is the underground reserve. Yes, underground reserve can get dry if water cannot find its way to the ground to be able to get it recharged. Then I think also try to look at things like eco-based adaptation, restoration of our ecosystem. There are a lot of ecosystems that are already in bad shape, but there is there is hope if we can be able to consider it as things that we can do. We can restore these places like the mangrove, the wetlands, the forest, those, because they are great barriers to disaster, against any hazard or that might result to disaster. Then we look at urban greening. How much have we done, in terms of trying to ensure that we conserve the trees around our urban areas, which is also very good in not just reducing the temperature or moderating the temperature within the urban environment, but also help in carbon sequestration, which is really helps to help us have not just a cool environment, but also have a healthy environment. So then I think participation, inclusive and participatory governance is also very important for us to see, okay, how do we get, people in the community engaged, involved in planning, as we have projects, how do we get them involved? How do we tell them, okay, this is the way we want to roll this project, and see whether, they have other ideas that can help us to run it more effectively. And also when they participate in project planning or whatever, it makes it they own the project more than the people that are bringing the project to the community. And also there is need for us to prioritize, the vulnerable group like the women, children, and low-income population for us to be able to build resilience. Resilience cannot be built. Sometimes what we are saying that people are not resilient to, sometimes because it's lack of financial capacity that makes people not to be resilient to the challenges that come around. Adaptation cannot take place, when people don't even have some resource of income that can be able to help them get adapt to the challenges that is there. Climate change is with us. People need to adapt, but sometimes we need to build our we need to prioritize our vulnerable community in order for them to be able to also build resilience. Then I'll look at finally the climate change resilience and water and energy nexus, like we have already talked about. Water is a challenge, but what do we do? The challenge is that sometimes lack of understanding the environmental system. When you cut down forests, you increase runoff and you reduce infiltration. And when you reduce infiltration, you bring about disappearance of our rivers. Our rivers get dry. There are rivers that if maybe in your community you have stayed for some time, you realize that this river used to be more than what it is now. But why is it not? Why is it shrinking? And this is because one thing, if you remove an entire vegetation and maybe replace with a building, and let me even say, if you replace it with agricultural activities, sometimes, it reduces the amount of water, surface water. And so if our surface water is being reduced, so think about it, our underground water is definitely going to be affected. So there is need to understand that, that yes, create awareness in our communities that we are keeping these trees. We are keeping this because if we keep them, we're going to keep our water. If we keep it, we're going to help ourselves from a lot of challenges. So I would like to stop here. I have some few things I needed to add, but I know time is already getting all these things. So I would like to stop here. Apologies for not giving us a proper slide, because I just feel that we see a moment of us to chat and discuss and see how we can be able to build resilience to our cities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor, for your inputs and your comments and how you spoke of the challenges, that lack of capacity building that most municipalities encounter, but also how do we raise awareness within communities, because that's very key, as communities are the ones that face the outcomes of climate change. I know, for instance, a lot of municipalities often don't maintain their infrastructure. So when you look at, for instance, your stormwater management system, very often the floods become worse because the storm management isn't done properly and it's blocked. I saw in George when I was there last week, they were actually emptying, removing all the dirt, which helps, because then when you get extreme weather events and it rains a lot, at least then, the system isn't blocked and it doesn't cause as much havoc as it would have if it was blocked. Colleagues, I'm not sure if you've got any questions. I don't see any questions in the chat box. I also note, a lot of municipalities also struggle with communities settling in sensitive environmental areas. I know that's a huge challenge, and I think very often it's due to the lack of knowledge. A person would just see an open land and think, well, there's just a little bit of water, let's try and settle here, not knowing the impact it's causing on the environment, the detrimental impact. I see a comment from Mandy. Oh, so Doc, will you please share the documents with us, and also your contact details, so that we share with all the participants? If anyone has
Yes,
any...
I will do that. I will do that.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah. Any questions, comments regarding the presentation? Any challenges that your municipality faces that you'd like to share, and perhaps how you address that challenge? Councillor Des?
I thank you. Yes, I just want to say that we as a municipality nogal struggle with when it's heavy rains and all the rains is going into our stormwater system, then it all of a sudden it ends up in our sewer system. So that is causing, when we see the stats, it's almost like we need a whole new sewerage system, but that is not the case. So how do we handle that? Because that is nogal a bummer for us as a municipality at the end of the day.
Thanks, Councillor. Doctor, I'm not sure if you've got an.
Yeah, she's
Okay.
talking. If I get her correctly, she's talking at like, okay, whenever it rains, like the stormwater system is not really effectively working as it should, and thereby the water, gets to the environment gets to be flooded because of the lack of effectiveness of the stormwater system. Is that the question?
Yes.
All right. Like while you were talking, you talk about the water system, the stormwater system. I think the challenge we have is that most of our cities that have the stormwater system, times have changed. When I mean times have changed, the population has increased. You understand? And runoff has now increased. When those stormwater systems were designed, some of them were designed to the capacity of the stormwater system was, let's say, for example, the capacity was 4. Now the amount of water that gets to that place is like 5 or 6. You understand? So the water must find its way to other places. And why are we talking about that? Because now you have more buildings, and more buildings, you see the roofs also help in ensuring that more water is on the street. And that's why you look at it, the flooding we're having now is not just people by the road, by the river that are getting affected by flooding, but in fact it's even an issue, people that are by the roadside. We conducted a research recently in Bloemfontein. Bloemfontein is an area where the rainfall is not that much. You understand? You don't have so much rainfall in the year, but anytime it rains, you understand, you realize that there are times you realize that there is from level of flooding, and those flooding are around the roadside. And what we concluded is that indeed is because the vegetation cover has been removed, people have increased over time, and the stormwater system that has been in place for years is still the same water system or flood water system that is still in place. So there is need to expand this stormwater system to be able to accommodate the amount of water that is coming in now. You understand? If we don't do that, seasonally we're going to be having flooding. It's not that the amount of rainfall has changed, but you just realize that yearly the rate the rate at which people are more vulnerable to flooding is increasing because the drainages get blocked, the flow water system is getting affected, and our natural buffer, which is the wetland, has been occupied. So the water lacks where to go to. In fact, recently I have a work now, we're trying to publish it recently. We did a work in KZN. We did a flood risk assessment in KZN, and we overlay it with the number of informal settlement in KZN. And the result is still on that process. I already have it as this thing. And we come about realize that about 80% of the informal settlement in KZN, or in Itequini rather, you understand, are under high flood, high area susceptible to flooding. And when we look at it deeply, we realize that most of the informal settlement are on wetlands. You understand? Are on wetlands. So, so when all those places that are supposed to be our natural buffers are being occupied by pervious surfaces with buildings, then we just realize that definitely we're going to have a lot of urban flooding around. Yeah.
Thank you, Doc. Councillor, I'm not sure. Is your question was answered? Hey.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor. There are no more questions. Okay, I see a comment from Prof. Wall saying that the primary problem is sewers, which allow water in. Thereby, much of inflow to sewage works in rainy season is clean, overwhelming the works. Yeah, so a lot of the and also what I've also picked up in the recent years is that many community members actually throw waste in, you know, your sewage, I mean your stormwater system, which also blocks it and creates other problems later on. Colleagues, I don't see any more questions. I think we've come to the end. We will share the presentations and the notes that Doc was talking to during his inputs. And we'll also share Doc's email address and Mandy's email address with you if you have any questions regarding projects, and if you need to draft your own projects as well, and you need help, I'm sure they'd be willing to assist. So with no further ado, our session is adjourned. We've come to the end. Thank you all for participating. We'll be in touch soon for the next City Lunchtime chat. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.